Hello, Sewing Bees. This is Sue Very Pruitt from Suki Sews. And before we get started, I wanted to let you know that you can design and win your very own Bernina Dream Studio. Just check out BerninaSweepstakes.com. When I designed mine, I just had to have space for all my machines, the ones I already owned and the ones I wanted to add to my studio. See it for yourself and get in today to Bernina Dream Studio $100,000 giveaway at BerninaSweepstakes.com. Dream it, design it, win it.
Welcome to a special episode of So-and-So brought to you by Bernina, made to create. I'm Meg Goodman, and you're about to join us for an exclusive and behind-the-scenes experience at QuiltCon 2023 in Atlanta. We're in Atlanta, Georgia, where they welcome more than 1 million international visitors each year, and with 71 countries having representation here through a consulate or trade office, there's a diversity that is reflected even in this event. From arts and culture to music and cuisine, the city is full of opportunities for everyone. QuiltCon is an example of those opportunities. This year's QuiltCon is 2023's largest sewing and quilting kickoff, with more than 600 quilts on display. People from all 50 states are here and visitors from 19 countries. There are 195 lectures and more than $20,000 in prize money to be awarded. The hospitality and inclusion is notable, and we're ready to take you on an exclusive adventure talking to show organizers, featured artists, notable Black sewists, activists, vendors, and attendees, with a few surprises thrown in as well.
Just a heads up, the show floor will open in 9 minutes. Let's have a great day.
The hosting organization is called the Modern Quilt Guild, and it's in this very name that we begin to set the tenor of this event. When asked to define modern quilting, we got a variety of answers. Aleeda Crawley, president of the Modern Quilt Guild, shares her perspective.
So when I joined it, I thought of it as the unguild guild, because one of the things that people were finding in guilds is that if you didn't have a certain aesthetic, that your quilts or your work was considered less than, or just that's not quilting. And one of the things that I loved about modern quilting is that there's lots of things that could make your quilt modern, but you don't have to have all of those elements. And so, and one of the things I was having dinner last night with Alyssa, who is one of the founders, and she said, we never defined that all of these things have to be in there, and the quilt can't have borders and things like that, but it was this openness and this exploration, but also a strong recognition of quilting as artistry.
Karen Cooper, executive director of the Modern Quilt Guild, contributes her point of view.
There are two ways to think about the Modern Quilt Guild. When it was founded, it was about modern style quilts, mid-century modern, use of bold colors, a lot of asymmetrical design, negative space. Think of mid-century modern into a quilt and design. When I first learned about the Modern Quilt Guild, long before I was on staff, to me it was a modern way of thinking, to just be inclusive and to just be friendly and to appreciate all kinds of art and quilts and not nitpick people's skill level or not nitpick their style, but just to be accepting of all styles. So I think of it both ways. You're going to see modern style quilts in our show, but I hope what you feel when you see our people and meet our members is that it's just an inclusive, friendly, modern way of thinking.
It came about, I believe, in 2009, and then they had their very first quilt show in 2013. And so even though the style of modern quilting is nothing new, the movement kind of coalesced when a couple of really, courageous women got together and said, let's formalize this. Let's make a guild to capture this movement and this excitement of this genre of quilting, which is basically a little bit traditional, a little bit art, kind of blending, a lot of abstract, really cool mid-century modern kind of style. When I went to that first QuiltCon, I never knew that these types of quilts existed, and here was a whole show of them.
Christa Watson, a Bernina Ambassador, certainly has a viewpoint, as does Latifa Safir, last year's keynote speaker at QuiltCon.
There
the Modern Quilt Guild does a pretty good job of defining some things that a lot of people associate with it. So I consider modern quilting, I call it the 2 A's. There's attitude and there's aesthetic. So part of the attitude of the modern quilter is that it's pretty much just do it. So early on, people interpreted that to mean that we didn't care about workmanship. But it's not that. It's that we don't let not knowing how to do it stopping us from diving into it. And that was a lot of the energy, especially in the early years. And there's definitely aesthetic. So you have different elements that you'll think about, like negative space. Certain color schemes are considered very modern. So there's a number of things. I am one of those kind of people. I don't always even though I'm a co-founder of the Guild, consider myself a modern quilter. I consider myself a quilter, and I quilt what brings me joy, and that's what I really encourage people to do. But there is something that's really new and fresh still about coming to a QuiltCon and seeing the quilts that are accepted as a modern quilt. So the Guild is actually a really great resource for learning about the specifics of that aesthetic.
Even attendees representing Johannesburg, the Netherlands, and France have a viewpoint.
White spaces or, different lines. The color, mostly plain fabrics. So that's what I think is modern for me.
I like taking the traditional quilts and changing them into something more modern.
Modern is big blocks, solid fabric, and negative space, and quilt straight lines, whatever you want.
Yeah, I think I also like the fact that you're taking a traditional and changing it and making it your own. Because I think that's a lot to me of what modern is. It's maybe starting with a traditional idea, but then moving on and altering, distorting.
Truly, the differing definitions added a color perspective to this event and provide great points of conversation. So what does it take to put on an event of this size? Well, we asked Elizabeth Dackson, Director of Events for Modern Quilt Guild, to explain and to share a hidden secret about the show.
The ability to spin a number of plates at the same time. I've said to my staff a few times that it's a lot like trying to cook an intricate French recipe that you've never made before, but without a Julia Child standing by and your children nagging and pulling on you on every corner of your person. I think the best hidden secret at QuiltCon is that all of the MQG shop purchases go to benefit the organization, the Modern Quilt Guild, a 501c3 organization, and all of the ticket sales for our giveaway quilt that we always have, a different one every year, that actually goes to the scholarship that we provide to MQG members in a limited basis to help them attend QuiltCon.
Karen Cooper shared even more behind-the-scenes information with us.
What does it take to put on a show like this? How many people are involved? Kind of take us through the things that make this all happen.
QuiltCon is a year-round activity on our staff. It takes up probably about 3/4 of our budget to put on. That's also where about 3/4 of our income comes from, so it works out. But we have 4 full-time staff and 3 part-time staff that work for the MQG year-round. At least 4 of those do nothing but QuiltCon. So year-round, and at any given time, we're working on about 3 different years' worth of QuiltCon between contracting future spaces. Right now, we're reviewing speaker applications for 2024, and we're looking at venue bids for 2026 and 2028. So there's just a lot of year-round, far-out planning. And then we're also just always looking at booking our special exhibits. But when we're on site, we have a crew of 13, which is my 7 staff members and 6 additional helpers. There are people who have been with us for a while. We have a couple staff members' husbands that join us year-round. That's a brave. My college roommate comes and joins us for a week. She takes a week off of her job and comes and does this for us. And then we also have about 300 volunteers that do anything from 1 4-hour shift to a total of 20 hours volunteering for us. So it's a massive volunteer effort. The MQG is also fortunate that as a craft organization, our members all have real jobs and real skills. So we have, members who are lawyers for us and who have, answered contract questions for us. And we have members who are accountants for us and make sure we get our tax documents done. So we are just very fortunate. We have people who have helped us with marketing. So it's hard to take QuiltCon down into one little group of things. It is truly an organization-led event. And I've worked events in 3 different industries, and I have never seen one where people are this passionate, where they literally take a vacation every year to come to an event, spend their own money, and come and be together and meet people. We actually had someone. It's a touching, it's a tearjerker, but we had a lady contact us about a week ago. Her and her friend were registered for this QuiltCon. They've come to every QuiltCon. Her friend had to go into hospice, and we didn't think was going to be able to come. So she had asked for us to be able to send her some things. And she wanted specifically the magazine. And so we were able to call our magazine editor to get the magazine sent. And it turned out that the magazine editor was a childhood friend of this woman's daughter. And so we got her the magazine. We heard from her friends. She did pass on the first day of QuiltCon. But it was neat to know that was that important to her, that she wanted to be part of it, and we could do one little thing to make her happy.
The connection is special.
Yes, very much so.
While this podcast has shared many stories of the kindness and caring of this community, Karen shared one that had a little different twist.
There was a lot of uproar in the last 12 to 15 months about the Modern Quilt Guild coming to Atlanta. Our members are very passionate about social causes. So we had a lot of people concerned about bringing our event and spending their money in an area where there were perhaps some restrictive political laws. There was perhaps some efforts to restrict voter access and things like that upset a lot of our members. And one thing that really struck me is we tried to be very honest with our members. We cannot cancel an event for just a political reason. We're not big enough. We would have bankrupted the organization to cancel QuiltCon for a political related reason. But when we explain that to our members and we just talk to our members honestly and told them, a little transparency, a little behind the scenes about how much money we have in contracts and how much money we need to run our organization. And then we turned it around and talked about what kind of impact we could have on quilting and on the local community. Our members responded so positively. And I think that's part of the reason we have a big crowd this year, is because we talked about how we can make a positive statement related to things that maybe we're not too happy about.
This community, as in any family, has challenges to overcome and opportunities to shine. These opportunities were notably apparent in the words and reactions of the Black sewists who were prominent in this event. As a side note, there's a lot more to the stories we heard from these Black sewists, so we'll share a little here, but look for an upcoming episode dedicated to telling so much more. Chawne Kimber, mathematician, college dean, and quilter known for expressing her political activism in her quilts, was this year's keynote speaker. Chawne's work can be found in the Smithsonian, Michigan State University, and the Renwick Gallery. She shared her impression of this event and why it's important to be here.
It was a lot of people, so it was very warm in the room, but a lot of energy, a lot of positivity, which I really enjoy.
You call yourself quirky, artsy, crafty, mathy chick.
Mm-hmm.
What's the quirky?
It's part of the mathy, probably, but I'm different. I don't fulfill expectations in pretty much anything that I do in my life, in terms of fulfilling stereotypical expectations. I'm different.
Chawne, our last question: why is being at QuiltCon important to you?
Ooh, that's actually a more complicated question than you think it is. But it is important to me to be at this QuiltCon doing this today because it represents a huge evolution of the organization, of quilting on the whole, and the potential for the future.
Latifa Safir shared the gist of her last year's keynote and how she's making a difference.
I talked about a number of things. I told the story of my quilt journey and how we came to be a co-founder of the Modern Quilt Guild. But I just talked about the meaning of quilts in my life.
But I wrapped up the lecture talking about the responsibility of all quilters in the room and as part of the organization to have the responsibility of having an environment that is welcoming to everyone. So it was just a message about quilting in my life and how we need to create and foster environments in our community.
So your motto is sprinkling the world with beauty one stitch at a time. Tell us about that.
So that actually encompasses a couple of things. I think that one of the main, people quilt for different reasons, but one of the main things that a lot of quilters do is we like to create objects, useful objects of beauty that we share with our family and our friends and those that we love. The flip side of that, the one stitch at a time, is I have another motto that nothing is difficult if we take it one stitch at a time. So a lot of the techniques that I teach and the tools that I develop are to help people to conquer those techniques, but I'll take beginners who first sat in a machine because it literally is one stitch at a time. And it's kind of the way that I approach life in general.
The Modern Quilt Guild was joined by 2 additional organizations leading the way for Black stitchers. The head of each sat with us to talk about their organizations and their work. Aleeda Crawley, president of the Modern Quilt Guild, shared her vision for her term and one of the hardest things to monitor at a show.
The thing that I'm going to focus on is education, and it's leadership education, and that comes from, we did a lot of work on DEI, but we know that there's a lot, and I shouldn't say DEI, we call the Diversity Committee IDEA, for Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Access. And so within IDEA, there were things that we had submitted to the board, but other board members were working on things like governance, and we were getting requests from the guild leaders saying, hey, we need information on programming, and we know that part of the things that produces strong and healthy guilds is having succession planning. How do you produce leaders within your guild? Having programming for guild leaders, secretary, treasurer, president, but also having some things that they might need, idea-related topics, and conflict resolution, because again, humans. And so what I see for the next year at least will be a heavy focus on how do we support those guild leaders best. And so that is what my personal charge is. And so we're going to see how we can help them make MQG even better.
I like that. Don't touch the quilt. And the minute you say don't touch them,
they want to get close and they want to feel it. And that's interesting because if you were in a museum, they would never touch a painting hanging on the wall. And again, that's again a thing of looking at that quilt as a piece of art. When it's hung like that, if it's in somebody's home, completely different functionality and access. But when it's hanging on the wall, it's artwork. I am happy for the people who came. I'm happy for the vendors who seem to be having a very successful QuiltCon. I am most happy for the staff because a small but mighty staff of 7 pulls off this miracle every year. Everything you see here, and everybody who comes to me and says thank you, I say go find a person in a purple shirt because they did the heavy lifting. I have to be here, but I'm kind of just here just to support them.
And it's the tenor of this show, the community and the safety, that is paramount to Lisa Woolfork of Black Women Stitch.
I would never sew again with any person who did not believe that my children's lives had value. It is not safe for me to do so. And since making that decision, and that's when I decided to create Black Women Stitch. That's why I called it Black Women Stitch, the sewing group where Black lives matter. I wanted to put it right out there that this is Blackness, and it's Blackness in a particular way, that we are Black affirming, Black forward, Black liberation, social justice, equity, all of that. But it's not a diversity and inclusion project. It's not about let us help them see us. See us, include us, include us. I don't want that. I don't want to be included. I don't want to be seen. I see myself, and we see each other. And we have that capacity and always have.
Lisa also shared her unique travel adventure in coming to this year's QuiltCon. You did a special project coming here sewing on the train. Tell us about that.
Listen, the Amtrak is wonderful. Naomi and I took the Amtrak Crescent south, which is the 19, going from Washington, D.C. She got on in D.C. I got on in Charlottesville, Virginia, and then 12 hours later, we were here. And I was able to take my Bernette 33, which is my favorite travel machine. I got it onto the train. We set it up on that little table, and I actually managed to finish a little wall hanging that I had been sitting on for actual years and been dragging it around in the travel bag. And I was like, oh, wait. This is perfect timing. So I absolutely finished sewing that wall hanging on the train. So it was a lot of fun. And I've sewn in airports. I take my little Bernette 33. We've gone to California. We've gone to Texas. We've gone to, obviously, here on the East Coast. So that Bernette has been in 3 time zones with me. So I love that little Bernette 33.
Then it was Peggy Martin's turn to share with us the story of the Brown Sugar Stitchers. Will you tell us about the founding of this group? How did it come to be?
3 or 4 ladies plus the librarian at the Wesley Chapel Library met, decided they wanted to create some kind of crafting class or group for the community. And then from that, it evolved to where we are today. Michelle Willis, Nancy Franklin, the late Jocelyn Carter, maybe one other lady, but they endorsed Wells, who was the librarian. They had the vision, and they created this organization that we now have.
And the name of the organization? Well, Peggy explains to us how that came to be.
Actually, it's not because of our skin tone. It's really because the library where we meet, there was a gentleman there, his last name was Brown. So that's where the Brown comes from, and then I guess they played around with it, and it ended up Brown Sugar Stitchers. Sound like a good name. Okay, that's it.
A surprise at this year's show was the quilt created by Uzoma Samuel from Nigeria. This first-time quilter absolutely blew people away when they experienced his amazing art, which is reminiscent of the work of artist Bisa Butler, who was our guest on the first episode of this podcast.
I think it's the most amazing moment of my career as a fabric artist.
This is one of the first quilts that you've put together. Talk about your inspiration. Why do you quilt?
Thank you. This is much of an endowment from my family or my mother as a seamstress. It's a thing from childhood I picked up, even if I had attended an art school. But coming back from the school and then back home, everyone is dealing with fashion, fabrics at home, my sisters and all that. So it inspired me, motivated me to follow them up. And then I'm converting from using paint to do my art. Then I started seeing fabrics as paint. So that was my inspiration, first of all. And I grew over the years practicing, experimenting, and finally coming into my first quilt, where I have actually arrived to master what I have been practicing now.
He also shared how all of this came about for him.
Yeah, working on this one, first of all, as a painter and a photographer, which I was trained of. So most of my energy lies in pictorial, composing images of people, portraitures. And this is much of a neighborhood children, which I like working on something from my environment. And the processes entails drawing, putting the fabrics together, and finally collaborating with my colleague in the US here, who finally helped to cement everything with the machine quilting.
And in a community of friends, it was his new friend, Sarah Trail, found through Facebook, who had a profound effect on Uzoma creating his quilt and coming to QuiltCon.
So you received this quilt. You've got a connection to Sam. How did that come about?
Facebook. He reached out wanting to learn how to sew. And so his initial question was, do you ever do anything international? We see you teach kids for free. Could you teach me? And I'm like, yeah, where are you? And then once he said Nigeria, I'm like, let's FaceTime or Facebook video time. Is you call it like we video called. And he's just like, I want to learn. I don't have much resources, but, what can you teach me over Zoom? And I'm like, well, I saw his work that he did on Canvas. And I'm like, you're pretty top 10 in terms of talent. I don't know, but he wanted to learn technique. And so I'm like, well, if you can make a quilt top, I can get the quilt top finished in America. And then we can figure out next steps on how we can, get you connected with some real mentors in the industry to learn how to long arm, learn how to fuse, learn how to face your quilts, and really turn them into the 3-layer dimension pieces of art that are a quilt instead of just mounted canvases. So I got the quilts fresh from a DHL package from Nigeria, and it was an amazing quilt top made on a pretty lightweight gauze that a normal quilt foundation wouldn't have been put on. It's, the material he had available to him. So after looking at the layers, seeing how much, various pieces there are, I knew it was going to be a job for a very custom, freehand, talented machine long armor. So after reaching out to a few people in our network, a woman named Marion agreed to doing it, a woman in SACO member from Sacramento, where she did it not on a long arm, but on a mid arm, using nothing but Aurifil thread. And she really did the time to, spin the details on the faces, like changing a lot of thread colors. It was a pretty complex piece, and more than just the idea of enhancing the work, it's about securing every piece so nothing ever falls off, because the glue quality, he didn't get to use interfacing and things that a typical, art quilter would have used. He really used like Joann's quality glue and nothing else. So it was definitely a challenge, but between the different type of material, he used synthetic, he used wax prints, he used cottons, he used translucent like tulle, he used absolutely 15 different types of material, even sequined type of material. But yeah, it depicts a photo of like 8 kids braiding this young girl's hair. And the most, I think, beautiful part is he took the photo.
One of our favorite things to do at these events is to catch up in person with people who have been guests on this podcast. At QuiltCon, we ran into Becky Glasby, Director of Education at the National Quilt Museum, and Marissa Marquez from Brewer.
Becky, it's been almost a year since we visited with you during Quilt Week in Paducah. What is new since then at the National Quilt Museum?
Well, of course, we've got new exhibits that are up because we do switch out our exhibits pretty regularly. We're looking forward to our spring selection. We've got some fantastic pieces. Velda Newman, we're going to have Marilyn Badger coming up. Justin Young is going to be installed once we get back from QuiltCon, so that keeps us pretty busy. We've refreshed the galleries a little bit, some paint and shuffling walls and exhibit space as well. We've got exhibit of Kay Fassett quilts, which a lot of people are familiar with his fabrics to go through, so those are really fun. I'm still working. We're gearing up for Block of the Month. We're mixing it up this year, so we're not starting until May. It'll be a shorter round, and I'll give you kind of a sneak peek or sneak taste, I guess, of what's coming. We're changing up the block size for that. Instead of being a 12 by 12 block, we got to keep it fresh, got to keep it interesting, so it's going to be a 12 by 24 segment that people can create to go as part of our Block of the Month this year. So that should be kind of fun and interesting to see how people kind of take on, these other parameters for the challenge. And then I've also been teaching, I'm several weeks into teaching a beginner quilt class that we've started up again, just kind of local area at the museum. So we've got a full class, 15 people, some familiar with the museum, some familiar with quilting, some who've never ever done quilting ever before, so we're start to finish, just like we do our kids programs, our kids camps, and this one's for adults, so they're learning all about quilting and getting excited to create their first pieces, which is where a lot of us start, who get excited about it, and I'm sure where a lot of these artists started, of taking that first step into the quilt world.
Well, I'm doing artistic quilts. I've been presenting to SACWA, so I did have one quilt last year in Houston that I was very lucky because in the show it got sold. So I will not see it ever again. I'm very sad, but I'm very happy to get, it's an honor to sell a show. I got to selected for Sacred Threads, and it got in the front cover of the catalog, my quilt. And right now, Brewer Quilting and Supplies are going to be doing bags with one of my quilts. So I'm really, really thrilled. So everybody is going to be able to enjoy that one. So it's good. And just little by little, getting back to normal and getting to create more quilts and enjoying traveling. So that's going to be good too.
For those who like to shop, this was an emporium of possibilities. In fact, when we asked how the show was for them, many attendees said, expensive, with a big smile.
Probably the shopping. Shopping and meeting friends that we only see online.
I love seeing the quilts in the show. That's my favorite.
And it's these very vendors, purveyors of all things quilting, that were one of the main attractions.
So Creative Lounge, we are located in Mount Rainier, Maryland, right outside of D.C. I'm co-owner of it. My partner, Tisha Thorne, is the lead instructor of our company, and I'm more like the business side, so the CEO. So we are the culture keepers of sewing and quilting with the mission of teaching the world to sew one stitch at a time.
And how do you do that?
Through our membership program, we have over 400 members around the country where they participate either in a sew-along or a quilt-along program. They get discounts to our website. They get 3 virtual classes per month and just have lots of fun just being a part of a community. We also have children's classes in person. We have summer camp for kids, sewing, of course. We have a physical retail store and a online store as well.
So Holly and Knight started String and Story about 7 years ago, and it was originally in her home, quilting, long arm quilting for people, making t-shirt quilts for people. Over the years, it's grown to where Holly Ann is a foremost educator in the free motion quilting community.
We've been actually really, really happy with the amount of visitors that have shown up to the show this year. It's been wonderful. Everybody's enjoying working with the Berninas here and having the opportunity to make something and take it home for free. And then we've allowed them to have this unique passport that gets them to walk the show and get some free fabric along the way.
Moda, we've been in business starting with United Notions since 1975. We just had our 45th year anniversary. We supply kind of a whole range of fabrics from traditional to modern, if those boundaries exist anymore, to independent quilt shops around the world.
Louise Duffy from Bernina of Georgia shared her excitement as well.
Oh my gosh, I am so excited to be here. This is actually my first QuiltCon. So I've done a couple of other shows, but nothing like the energy here at QuiltCon. So we are very excited to be here. I work for Atlanta and Augusta Sewing Center. I manage the store in Duluth, and I'm also the events and marketing director for the organization, which means we have 3 stores. So we have one in Marietta, my store in Duluth, and then we have one in Augusta. And it is a delight to work with the Nick and Amanda Maven as a family. We work and support. Okay, we're going to back up there. So we have 3 stores that represent 25 families. So while we sell products that are international companies, we are a small town family-run business that supports 25 families, and we are very, very committed to our customers and making sure that we understand what they want to make so we can provide them with the best tools and resources to make whatever that is the way they like it to be made.
Karen Cooper summed up QuiltCon perfectly.
It's a neat community like I have never met before. It's a family. It's very much a family.
The days were full and long, the mood upbeat, inclusive, realistic, and hopeful. It was all about much more than quilting and sewing. It was about the interwoven stories of those who quilt and sew and the effects they have and will have on each other. It was about yesterday, today, and the promise of a better tomorrow. It was about community. And it's this community that makes sewing and quilting so very much more. This was QuiltCon 2023. Our thanks to all who took the time to share their stories with us, stories about inspiration, excitement, activism, meeting old friends, and making new ones. QuiltCon 2023. If you know someone you think has an outstanding story, a story that should be shared on this podcast, please drop me a note to meg@soandsopodcast.com or complete the form on our website. Be sure to subscribe to, review, and rate this podcast on your favorite platform, and visit our website, soandsopodcast.com, for more information about today's and all of our guests. That's SEWANDSO podcast.com. And finally, I want to thank Bernina for making this program possible. I'm Meg Goodman, and I look forward to you joining us next time on So and So.